Okay, and now we are ready, finishing off the countdown. Welcome to this webinar. My name is Sophie, and I'll be your host during this, about an hour. Webinar with the intriguing topic of not trusting your IMA. Well, at least not unless you use zero trust. And in that, how you can use an IDE, that is the electronic identification. We have a great lineup today. It has grown a bit during our preparations. So today we'll be able to cover both the why, the how, and the what in this topic of implementing the best IMA, using the right tools, using the right practices, implementing the right culture, mindset, maybe even. We'll start out with Lars Nikamo, and he's in the picture, I think, now, who is the Nordic pre-sales team lead in the security company, cybersecurity company called Micro Focus. It's a British company, and they specialize in identity and security solutions. Lars will be addressing how to work with IMA in a zero trust perspective. What it means and why this is very important. Lars will be followed by Bjarke, who is here standing beside me, Bjarke Alling, sorry. Bjarke will be talking about the electronic identification, the possibilities using that, the EID, the possibilities using validated digital identities. And Bjarke, he's well equipped to talk about this, as Lars, he has been, he's the group director of Liga, but he's also the former chair of the National Council of Cybersecurity and the chair of IT Security Committee at the Danish IT Industry Association. So, Bjarke, he knows a thing or two. And then, to finish it all off, to round it off, we have a true practitioner and a man who's got his work in for him. Paul Wells, he is the IT manager of Muskelsvindfonden, and he's also running the daily operations of both Muskelsvindfonden, RC, FM, and Musholm. He's also involved in Green Concert and Circus Summarum here in Denmark. So we are talking about rehabilitating center, concerts with lots and lots of volunteers, and then a huge organization in the health science industry. So he's got some work to do, and right now he's implementing zero trust, and he's implementing the use of EIDs, and that is challenging. He'll be telling us about these challenges, and he'll be telling us about how he goes about dealing with these challenges. So he should give us some very exciting and very deep insights into how to work with this in practice. So that is the lineup we have for today. When we have finished the presentations, I'll be asking questions to our panel, but I hope that you will participate as well, should you have any questions or comments along the way. You can use the chat in Zoom to write out the questions, and I'll bring them along to the panel. So please join if you have any questions. But now, without any further ado, I'll pass on the word to Lars from Micro Focus, and he'll tell us about how not to trust your IMA unless you implement zero trust. Lars, go ahead.
All right. Good morning. Thanks for having me. Thanks for being invited to this. I'll give you a bit of intro and then talk a bit about zero trust and how that kind of fits with the EID that the rest of the group will follow up with in a few minutes. I've been working in the IAM space for the past 2 decades. At Micro Focus, so doing a bit of sales and technical work in that area for a long time. So what is zero trust? Really, I mean, this is not a new thing. You've heard about this before, all of you. So it's definitely not a product, says the guy from the product company, right? It's not. It's more of a way of thinking. It's a way of taking on your IAM problems. It's more of a philosophy or a process a way of thinking of this IAM problem, really. So it's about not really trusting anyone in your environment. That's internal people, external people, whoever. So it's about always verifying that any access or anything that you want to do is appropriate. So it's about that mindset, really. So having that said, that also means that there's no simple solution to the problem. There's no easy button, or there's no silver bullet, one thing that you need to do and then it's all fixed. It's, as with any other security related issue, it's about having a defense that's multi-layered, and you probably need to do many different things over time, at least to move in that direction or to improve your security. So that's just something to be aware of. Today we're going to be focusing on the EIDs, which is of course a crucial part, but there's a lot of other things that you probably want to think about as well. So I'll give you the brief intro. So what we're doing with IAM is basically defining the right access. How do we get the right access, and how do we provide the right access, and how do we make sure it's right over time? So it has to do with a lot of different things. It's about making sure the right people get there, and that we know who they are, of course. That's where the EID comes in. It's about giving out the proper access. Who are you? What's your role? And what should you be entitled to access? Really, and how should you be getting that access? I mean, should you be getting that from your home office? Obviously, I'm currently in my home office, so is this someplace that I'm entitled to get access to anything that I want to within my work area, or should I not be getting access when I'm at home? And what kind of resources should I get access to when I'm at home or in the office? Could it be different? Probably should be, right? Depending on the rules and the regulations, perhaps, that I have. So we also need to make sure that they kind of fit to this as well. And then it's the problem of managing this over time. I mean, most organizations, or in most places, you would make sure that you get your access, right? There's usually a process for it. There's a process for onboarding or requesting new access to different things. But you also need to make sure that it stays correct over time. If you're anything like me and you've been in the same place for a long time, then whatever access I got 3 years ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, is that still appropriate? Should I still be having that? Do I still have the same role in my organization, so that I should get access to the same things, or did it change over time? And then when should you have the access? Should you always have it? Kind of depends on what you're accessing, right? Probably should be able to access my email always, but perhaps other systems should not be accessed at any point in time. So it's all different depending on all these different variables. So this is kind of the problem that we're trying to solve with the IAM, and making sure that we have a zero trust thing around that. So what would you need to do then? Well, first that would be, of course, to ensure the identity. Make sure that the user is who the user says he is, and make sure we get the users into the systems in a proper way. This is where the EID would fit, right? So that we can verify that a user is who they say they are, and kind of piggyback on that process. And then, of course, we need to control access. So how do we get access, and how do we get in, and how do we let people get to specific systems or applications, or whatever that is? That needs to happen too. And then we probably need to think a bit about risk, because once we start tying this down or making it a bit more, you should only have access to what what you're entitled to, but nothing else. We also need to think about risk, because being too specific when it comes to access makes things complex from an administrative perspective, right? If we go too far down that alley. So risk is a great thing to consider and think about how different types of access will affect you and your organization. So when we do this, we want to evaluate risk based on what we normally do, based on what device I'm on, based on where I am, etc., and find anything that's out of the ordinary. That's kind of a good approach to think about with risk. And then it's about making sure that you have the access that you should have, of course, but you shouldn't have anything else. You shouldn't have access to things that you should not have access to. So when you give out access, you should really only give access that's limited to exactly what you need to do whatever you're supposed to do. That's kind of the philosophy of zero trust to get to that point. And then, of course, we have the admin accounts, right? So your super users, your root accounts, your admin accounts, your DBAs, etc. All these powerful accounts that have more access rights than any normal user. You need to make sure that you control them in an extra special way, right? You need to take control of them in order to get good control in general, because those are really the key to the kingdom. And then another thing that you may want to think about is user behavior. How do you make sure that whatever your users do is normal? So you should probably monitor your users and figure out what's out of the ordinary. Now, a good example of that would be with your bank. If you all of a sudden make a credit card transaction in a different country than you're normally at and in a large amount, probably someone from the bank will call you. And that is because they monitor for anomalies. They will find out that this transaction is not an ordinary transaction. So they will call you and say, hey, you just bought this and this in this country. Is that really you? Or is that someone that's trying to steal your information? If we start thinking about it, identities and authentication and access to system in that same way, finding what's normal and what's not normal for you specifically, then we can kind of solve this or get this extra layer of protection within this puzzle in a much better and easier way. So again, basic concept: don't assume trust. Don't trust anyone. We need to kind of maintain the access control at every point. So that should be the standard. And then follow this philosophy. Try not to grant more access than what you actually need. Just grant whatever access that you should have to perform whatever task you're trying to perform. So if you're a super user trying to do something in a system, then give people that access right for 1 hour when they need it. Don't give it always, because that will give you more risk or a higher risk posture in that way. So and then use the context. So if you understand more about the context than just getting authentication information, where are you? Are you on your normal device? Is this the normal hour for you to log in? Is this the normal system? Are you doing this in a normal way? If we can use that context, then the zero trust will be much more easy to follow. It's just another layer of security that we can use to get that extra trust. So again, some some of the building blocks for trusted access is don't assume trust. Don't trust people just because they're in the inside of your firewall. Treat everyone equally from that perspective. Use the context. Make sure you understand what the normal behavior of your user is, so that you can either make life easier for them or make sure that you get a step-up authentication. So if I'm in my office doing normal work on my normal workstation during working hours or office hours, then perhaps I get a single sign-on access. But if I'm at home and it's a Saturday evening, I'm on my iPad that I just received because I bought it, then perhaps we need to provide a stronger proof of authentication, or you should perhaps just deny the user to log in at all. So that's the context. And then over time, make sure that your identity is correct, make sure your access is correct, and use whatever mechanisms we can to get that assurance. So that kind of brings us down to the EID that we'll be talking more about in a minute. And then make sure you don't give out more privileges than you actually need for your task. That would kind of be the last box. Give out as little as you possibly can in order to provide that zero trust philosophy. So again, you probably need to start thinking about this in a slightly different way. IAM has been around for a long time. It's not a new thing, but there are some new challenges and some new requirements that will probably require you to think a bit differently and using tools in a bit of a different ways. So you need to be smart about it. I guess that's the simple conclusion, and use intelligence to get there. And with that, I'm going to hand it back over to Sophie to introduce our next speaker.
Thank you so much, Lars. And very interesting, the new takes on the IMA and the new challenges, trying to navigate and trying to find just the right balance in managing this identity and access and providing the right privileges to your users and the ones who have access to your systems. Now, as Lars just said, one focal point in doing this, and you build around that. But a fundamental thing here is getting access to validate the digital identities. And the most crucial tool for doing that is developing or using a solution which provides this digital identity and a way to prove that and validate it. And that is exactly the point that Bjarke he will be addressing now. So take it away, Bjarke.
Thank you so much. And good morning to all of you. It's a pleasure being here. We are in a quite hot studio here in Copenhagen, but I trust that you have found a nice, cool place outside somewhere and listening to all we have to say. So yes, correctly, as Sophie said, EID, I think when you're discussing and talking about this chain of trust and the way that zero trust is considering and being designed, we always need an anchor point, and this is exactly the heading that I like to take you now for the next about 10 minutes. So at the end of the day, in a digital world as well as in the physical world, people need to trust each other. Otherwise, it's quite complicated conducting business, having social relationships. Whatever we do, we need to feel sure that this is something we can trust. So, looking at a little bit back in history, how were that kind of going on many years ago? So, trust has more or less moved itself in the last 50 years, moved from, this physical presence that you arrived at your workplace, everyone knew each other, all the people sitting there working in these catalogs or indexes. I don't know, actually, maybe someone in the chat can put in a note on what potentially they are actually doing. It looks like some accounting or recording, some area of that with all these index cards that they're working with. But at the end of the day, that's kind of how we began working and collecting data and collecting information and working together. Another thing that we also did were that we were on location. We were used to going physical somewhere. Keep in mind when computers arrived on the scene in 60s and 70s, 50, 60, 70 years ago, we had to physically go to our location. We had to go to the office. In the office there was a computer. The computer was connected to a cable. So one of the factors that granted us access to these computers was that we were allowed to go in physically into a building. Looking at today, where everything is spread across everywhere, digital, I can access my data from my phone sitting in a train or in a car in a parking lot or wherever I go. I have always, more or less, 100% always on access to critical data, to critical systems. So some of the barriers that we had in the past, we have literally taken those away and replaced that. Also, another thing, looking at the kind of way that we store data, these folders, file lists that you see here in the image, it was quite hard to steal all this data. You had to, if you had to steal a lot of data, I think it would be quite an operation. So you might be able to steal a single file or a few documents, but definitely not this very large amount of data that we see today being stolen from companies. But also knowing who you are, I think this is a good example of the prior to internet link-in system. I think some of you that might start early in the and working before we had the internet, we all remember having these catalog or index card systems on our desk where you put in a business card and then you made some small notes along to it or on the back of the index card saying, okay, I spoke to this person, it might be relevant, what was the name, searching through, all of that. So the principles of KYC, know your customer, know your employee, know your ex, all of those things were implicit in the way that business was conducted in the past because it was all built on physical parameters and physical touch to people. Well, I think it's, we just don't do that anymore. So how can we kind of reintroduce trust into our digital facilities, to our user base, into our networks? How can we do that? What is the modern trust? How does that actually work? And looking at that, I think the modern trust today is also what we have here is the EID, the electronic identification. Because the electronic identification, suddenly I get that trust and get reintroduced into my behavior. I can always fall back to make sure that my government and or others are vouching for the identity. And that vouching is critical to obtain and maintain your ongoing security in your network. So a digital solution for proof of identity, and even more important, trust isn't earned, it's inherited. Look at that as a chain of trust that, my government is guaranteed who I am. That's why I can get a passport, states my citizenship, but I can also get an EID, national. In Denmark, we have our MitID. In Sweden, you have the bank ID. There also might be some using Fire ID. Norway with bank ID, and we see now Personalausweis going also digital in Germany and a lot of other countries. And that's exactly looking across Europe. This is exactly how this is evolving. And so this is based on the European regulation. This is based on the European collaboration on making sure that all citizens in the 27 member states of Europe can work together digital and also in a safe and trusted manner. So using this platform and moving this trust into your companies is bringing a lot of advantages and a lot of opportunities for the companies, especially because we can get this validated stack of identities. And that was one of the things that Lars just touches on the zero trust and the validation. If we have a validated identity base, it's far more easy to filter out all the bad things, the things that are not supposed to be there. Because if I have a 2,000 user database or 10,000 user database, it's easy to say, okay, the 99% has been validated. I know those are real people, but I still have something that should have been discontinued or deactivated or removed or duplicates or maybe just one single fake account that shouldn't be there. So, how much can I inherit? How can I do that? So let's have just a very brief look at the eIDAS regulation. And the eIDAS regulation is, as I said, this is the European implementation of a framework of, you could say, zero trust. That's the fundamental idea. How can I exchange my identities digital across Europe? And the regulation is building on a fundamental principle of what is named level of assurance. And level of assurance is the referring to the kind of the degree, how much did I do to this ID validation process, but also to the authentication process. So look at the identity in a two-way manner, that the first part is how is the identity actually verified, but also when you use your identity, how are you using, how difficult it is for others to steal your identity. So the eIDAS regulation is building on this lower level, which is the short name for that. And you see here, this is level low. And level low is, as an example, self-enrollment to a website where you just enter your username, a username, typically an email address, then a password, and then or set a password by getting a challenge response. It's a very simple way, and everyone knows that it's highly insecure today. It's quite easy to get passwords, and you see that all the time. So it's a major security issue that people is continue using username, password, accessing critical data. That's why we have the level of substantial. And in the case of level substantial, the ID validation is more careful done. The user is more, the person is more carefully vetted, and the way that you access the systems are requiring using more than just username, password, but also another factor. And the factor here, we can always come back and discuss, various factors, various methods, passwordless versus not passwordless. But the important thing is that we suddenly now start using tools that prevent potential leakage of data, leakage of identities. And then you have another level also, which is called level high, where you are even more careful controlling what are the identity, and also even more carefully making sure that the way that you're using your identity in the daily life is also more comprehensive control, and depending on the case and where you're working. But typically, let's say a doctor that needs to change a prescription of a patient, that is something that's seen as very critical. Therefore, you would need to work on level high, or in a banking sector where you need to transfer a lot of money, that would also be seen as a level high. So the use of eID, where are the good spots? Why does this actually make sense in all the ways that we work digital? So let me just give you a few examples. Onboarding, I have a new user, I have a new customer, I have a new employee, I have maybe an external worker, classic process. How can I onboard someone that did not have some in advanced password? Should I send them a default password? That's my point here. We can actually use the eID framework to onboard a user, and therefore we can generate the right credentials and then set up the company account without further usage of the private identity, just for the onboarding. Also, digital signature. I think we all know this process with PDF files. You receive a document, print it out, sign it with ink, scanning and sending it back. That's kind of quite clumsy. So sending emails or sending PDF files that are signed digital, in which we can trust, it's a major advantage for many people. I just need to click here also so you can see the digital signature. So just moving along here, validation. Lars talked about something is happening in your network. Maybe it's an advantage for you saying, that was an incident. I just need to make sure that this account is actually connected to the right user. So therefore I will request a revalidation. Authentication, obviously, we just talked about that. So it's in many cases, maybe for some environments, it makes sense. If you have a large amount of users, maybe you were, let's say, a retail or university or similar places where you have a very big amount of users, and in which it is complicated issuing them another factor that is a company issued thing. it might be convenient using their existing eID for authentication also to some of the work or school or university related tasks. At least that can solve some heavy problems. And finally, of course, more low practice password reset. It's a simple thing. So the future of trust, how does that look? We have already now eIDAS 2.0, that's the digital wallet. It's something that's been working with in Brussels with the European Union. You can go and look for that. You also, as I said, derive credentials. I think it's actually an underestimated, understated area where you literally can get very valuable trust into your own network by literally building your own company structure on this eID. International law, there's no doubt that we will see more laws coming. We will see the NIS2 coming now. We have, obviously, GDPR and other regulations, but there will be far more to come and tapping into that area. International competition. It's already known that you can increase your competitiveness in a market if you prove to your customers and suppliers that you are strong on cybersecurity. ISO certification, these kind of things, it provides value to you. So you can use eID to stack in that story and make sure that your company is presented, or your organization is presented in a competitive way where you are looking carefully into cybersecurity areas. Combating fraud, I think it's obvious. Lars just mentioned the credit card, but there would be tens of other thousands of examples where you can use eID to make sure that if you have any doubt, you can revalidate, you can check, you can do these things. And finally, dealing with misinformation. I think that's something when you submit data. I just mentioned that with the email signing. Business email compromising, where someone steals your email account, then suddenly redirect the payments to other places. This kind of areas where the data that you submit is guaranteed in a chain where I can see from where did the data come, is signed by a person I trust. All these flows are suddenly available. So with all of that, I would just say thank you so much for you and for my part. And I know we will come back also on some questions and answers and a little bit more. So yeah, please, Sophie, go on.
I'm not letting you off the hook, but you'll have some time, because right now I would like to continue with Paul. Now, as Bjarke and Lars, they have emphasized in their respectively in their presentations, we need to do things differently. We have a digitized world. We communicate in a digital way. We access and get access to things by digital means. So we need to do things differently, and we need to use different tools. Question is how and what? Paul, he's right now in the process, in this transition to this whole new age, this whole new way of dealing with being digitized. So Paul, he has maybe the best insight into the how, the what, the help, the what am I going to do. So Paul, I know you're trying or in the midst of implementing Zero Trust, and you are in the midst of going through a transition where you're going to use the eID. So could you just give us a brief presentation of this challenge, of maybe, because that is a point in itself, the organization you are servicing as the IT manager. Could you just give us a brief introduction into that?
Sure, and thank you for inviting me today. Well, as Sophie mentioned earlier, I'm in charge of a variety of different organizations, from a hospital that's government funded to a non-profit organization for a better life with neuromuscular diseases, diagnosis, and a conference center. Also, we have the concerts, partnering with Tuborg Carlsberg and Circus Marm with the Danish television. So we have a variety of users, from inside healthcare workers to finance people to volunteers, and we need to sort out who gets access to what. So a volunteer cannot access patient data or a contract with an artist. That would be a catastrophe. So zero trust implementing, I don't know if we're implementing it. It's more of an idea, more of a mindset, trying to remove all these, like Bjarke and Lars said, everywhere you have granted access, you need to reevaluate, remove, and start all over. And we can do that with some tools. The tools themselves are not zero trust, but they can help you along the way. Among that is the e-identity. It could also be PAM as privileged access management. It could be ITIL for managing the process. And it could be layer 8 firewalls from the OC model that previously had 7 layers. We now talk about 8 layers for managing users and granting access for users, depending on who they are. So I guess that's a brief look into where we are now, and we are not in any way done. Let me say that.
Well, as I said, you have quite a task in front of you. I think maybe to broaden the perspective on the challenges of your organization, could you just you have concerts, you have NGOs, you have a rehabilitation center. It sounds to me like you have a variety which spans from doctors to volunteers in a concert, traveling roadies traveling around the country. How do you implement? Is it more, as you said, it's not a tool. It's not a technical fix. This and Lars addressed that earlier as well. Zero trust is not a tool. It's a mindset. Is that part of your strategy, trying to implement a strategy, a culture, a mindset more than actually go digging into the specific technical solution? So you start with the culture, you start with the acceptance that we need to do something to protect our information or our systems, and then find the specific solution fit for the specific profile or place in your organization.
Sure, but you have to onboard the users and the management, of course. But the real hassle here is making it simple. Yeah. Because every management would say, well, my users, my employees, they are struggling enough with all this IT, and I don't want to burden them any further. So you have to convince management that, yeah, it might be a small hassle, but we will federate and we will carry this sign-in, this single sign-on around to different systems, so the user only has to do it once. So the hassle is perhaps in the morning, and then, like Lars said, well, if the user is off track in some point, you can have systems monitoring, and you can grab there and say, well, you just have to re-authenticate to get access to this.
Yeah. And in your view, is the EID where you carry along with you your digital identity, which has been validated by trusted sources? In your view, is that, well, if not a quick fix, then one of the currently best solutions that you can find to make this convenience possible, that people don't have to have 12 different passwords, and which they don't have. Everyone has the same password everywhere. So in your view, what is the digital identification probably the best way, the best foundation of establishing the zero trust and thereby trust in your system?
Exactly. The EID is the carrying foundation for building further, for integrating, for managing this. There's no question about it.
So you mentioned a lot of different tools to use for your IT security or your cyber security, but in your view, is sort of you could look at the EID as this is the core, or this is the fundamental thing, and then you build according to the situation. Right here we need to have the PAM, or right here we need to have the whatever. So you build, but that is the fundamental thing you need to have in place, the validated digital identity in one solution or one tool which you carry with you.
Exactly, like our hospital or patient system is hosted at an
Yeah.
external partner, and in order to carry that digital identity with you there and inherit the trust, you need the EID.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. Because to me that sounds like it might be your gateway into to establishing this, because as you said, and we the two of us, we've been talking about this earlier, that this convenience issue, the lack, you might say, of convenience is actually the greatest barrier of getting implemented the zero trust mindset, or implementing the right level of security, that people find it too hassle-some and they don't do it and they use the same password everywhere. And then, of course, there is, no security
Well, it is
at
the
all.
biggest hassle. There's no question about it.
The
You
human
know it
factor.
from yourself. You have to log in everywhere. And imagine if you had a world where you could just log in once and carry your identity with you.
Oh, nirvana, really.
Yeah, but and that's what like Facebook and Google accounts with this federation around to other systems, they're trying to do now. But it's not a trusted identity. Or Facebook is not a trusted identity.
No, they're fighting the fake identities of fake profiles all the time. So I guess that if they had access to a trusted, inherited EID, that would be a good thing for all. Right. Thank you so very much, Lars. You gave us Paul, sorry. You gave us a great insight into what it is like working as a practitioner. As I said, if you have any questions, the ones who are following us from afar, if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to write it in the chat, and I will bring it along. But for now, I will sort of go round in circles, and I'll go back to you, Lars, because now I would like to dig a bit into the IMA, or IAM, Jesus, and how to implement that within the framework of zero trust. There was a thing that kind of caught my attention. Now, you were going through doing the right things, and you were going through, for example, doing things at the right time. You're also addressing using the right governance, trying to figure out how to implement the right governance. But then you also mentioned something which was not on your presentation, and that was the way I heard it, was using the right technical fix. And you introduced the use of artificial intelligence to spot abnormalities as a way of helping actually doing the governance which you have set out to do. Could you maybe explore a bit more on that? Because I think, without being completely sure, I think maybe a lot of people are thinking of the artificial intelligence still as being a bit immature right now, and can we trust it? It's an algorithm. Can we trust it? So, what are your views on that?
So yeah, that's a good it's a good way, or a good example of how we can introduce new ways of thinking, or using analytics to make better decisions, right? So we're going to use the computers for what they're good at, basically. So one way of looking at it would be, so if I'm going to do governance on your access rights, for example, I'm going to verify what you have access to. If I would get some help from someone that said, well, it seems like this user is kind of like this user, but here's a difference. So just so you know, then it would be easier for you to make that decision. Should I have access to this or not? I mean, that would be one way of doing it. Just doing some analytics, or posting some facts on where does this fit. And another way would be, at the time of, so assume I'm an end user and I'm logging into someplace, just establishing that normal baseline. What am I doing right now? Is this the normal thing for me as a person to do? Am I at my standard desktop? Is it a normal time? Am I accessing the normal systems? Am I authenticating in the same way I'm usually authenticating, etc.? If all these factors are correct, well then, let's make it easy on the user. So that's where the user friendliness comes in. So then we can say, okay, you'll get single sign-on to this. We trust you. You logged in earlier this morning, so it seems like this is still you. It's your normal behavior. If it wouldn't be, then we can challenge them with a step-up authentication, or we can just say, you can't get in. So it's using that analysis.
But would it be a problem to ask everyone to validate their identity if we had the EID? Now, because right now what I'm hearing is that I have to validate, if we're using the AI, I need to validate myself based on my behavior. That could be, some might find that kind of invasive.
And that would kind of, you shouldn't see it as invasive. I mean, we're always going to validate that you are who you say you are, right? That's a way of life. We always log in at some point. We have to do that, right? But we also want to make it more convenient. So how can we do that? So assuming everything is normal, maybe you don't have to authenticate as often, right? Okay. So you get a single sign-on period that lasts for 8 hours. So you log in the morning and then you're home free for the rest of the day in the office. Versus if you're in a completely different place, completely, different country, whatever, then we might want to authenticate you a bit more often because it's out of the ordinary. This is not your normal behavior. So then, that's where that comes in. So it's really, shouldn't just see it as increased in security, because it will increase security, but it will also increase convenience. And if we don't get the convenience part, then we're going to miss the end users, and then we have a problem again. So it's really important.
We're going circles around the convenience, because without convenience we have no implementation, it seems. Having covered that, I think that brings us back to the issue of governance, because right now you're saying, okay, so we maybe if we establish some rules to use the AI to kind of analyze our way of, based on your behavior, based on your profile, as how you log in and where you need to be and so forth. Someone has to define those rules of governance. Someone has to define how do we analyze the people trying to use or get access. So this brings about the question of, if we combine two of the rights you had in your your overview of doing things right in your presentation. So how do you combine the right governance at the right time and the right people, so to speak, defining this governance? Because to me, all the rules that we need to set up, all the different layers of security and the different rules and practices and policies of access, it seems like a huge task. So how do you do that conveniently as well? Is there a way?
It's of course a task, but it's still something you have to do. Being any organization in today's world, you're responsible for your users and what they have access to. So you need a process around that, and you need to fix the problem. So, but again, I think that risk is just a way to start thinking of things. It's not, where is the high risk in your organization? What's the system? What's the access right that has high risk? Where are the users that, create high risk? And focus on that. Start somewhere. You can't do, if you have 10,000 users and 10,000 groups and 10,000 roles, combine those, and should we do governance on all of them? No, of course not. It's impossible, right? But we have to figure out where's the outliers, where's the risk, where's the high risk, and computers are really good at analyzing that and finding that for us, so that we can focus on that small piece that we really need to focus on. And by doing that, we can eliminate a lot of that risk, and that's probably how we.
Yeah, I guess that was trying to manipulate as I am. That was kind of the circular movement I was trying to make, that we can get help. We can get help in trying to handle this question of you need to define your governance policies or practices. We can get help as well, so we don't have to define every single 10,000 roles and rules for our organization. There are ways to do this, so we focus on the things that might be a bit fickle. But you have also said, or you mentioned in your presentation, this question about the right time. As I heard your presentation, it sounded like, well, the sooner you get the rules in place, the sooner you get your governance in place, the better, really. So just take the time, do the job now, and then you're set. If you're doing it sort of along the way, it will be a huge task, and it will be very troublesome. But if you do it now, and if you sort of say, okay, now we're doing everything, we're putting the ticks on our list and finishing the job, then we're good. Of course, we might need to adjust along the way, but then we can use the AI to get to that. But you've mentioned earlier that a good start is half finished, as we say in Danish. So is that a valid point or a focal point that you need to start working now? Don't postpone.
Yeah, I think so. This is IAM is not. It's not a project. It's not something that we do and then we finish. It's a way of life. It's from now on, right? So you need to get started, and you need to refine, and you need to reiterate, and you need to do it over and over again. And I mean, the circle kind of continues. It will not go away in any ways. You know, it's going to stay around. So you need to get on it and start somewhere. Yeah, definitely. And then figure out what's important for you, so that you know where to start for your organization and to solve your urgent needs. That's where you should start. There's no silver bullet. You should do this first. There's plenty of things that you should do, but you need to start somewhere if you haven't, or cover some holes that you haven't covered.
And it sounds to me that like we have actually two great components of help. AI to analyze where we need to, decide something and do something, and then we have the EID, which can, be the basis of everything we do and all the access that we give, and then we can build on that, and you don't have to build new profiles every time. All right. Well, thank you so very much, Paul. We'll see now. I'm going to go back to Bjarke now, because we actually have some questions from our audience covering what I also believe is a quite vital point in the presentation. You had a map of Europe in your presentation, and the good news is that the EID is being implemented gradually, which is important. The EU has emphasized this by introducing the updated version with the NIS too. It is now, we need to move on this challenge. We also hear from both the Danish Cybersecurity Council and the FE, and the Americans are stressing that, well, not only Russians, but Chinese and it's everywhere. The threat is very, very significant. Also, we have numerous agencies doing an analysis which prove that if we want to work commercially across borders, we need to have a way of validating the identities, because or else there is no trust, and no trust, there is no trade, and that's bad, obviously. And I was going to ask Bjarke about how he sees the developments in Europe, because yes, we are seeing that more and more countries are gradually starting to introduce the EID, gradually starting to be more digitized, but it's not, it's not rushing, let's just say it that way. But we have a question from Lars Liltorp. And instead of me talking, I will just read his question for you, and I hope that in that way we can address this issue. And Lars, he writes, at the moment, EID is only in a limited number of EU countries. How can you validate identities from the rest of the world without physical presence showing ID? If you don't know him, you can't hear him, you can't smell him, what are you going to do?
Yeah, it's an obvious question, it's an obvious problem. It's kind of hen and egg. How can I know someone if I can't get something on which I can trust? I think for all people living in whatever country in the world, you will always carry a physical document with you, which is your passport. In today's modern environment, the passport is also consisting of a chip. So actually your passport is digital. There are still, pockets here and there where people still have quite old passports.
But my passport is not linked to my, say, email.
No, but it's linked to you.
True.
So if I get your passport and I have the right capacity and understanding to validate and check for a passport's validity, then I can with that document you can prove your identity. That's by fact. So obviously the passport is a little bit more complicated because it takes some processes, but the good news is that every single piece of phone that we have available on the market today, at least for the major brands and the major models out there of phones, they will support an NFC reading. So I'm able from my phone to read the digital content of your passport, and then by that information I'm able to, which more or less is the same as just reading the physical document, what is printed in the passport, I will be able to validate your identity using that information. So back to Lars's question, obviously inside Europe, as I said, there will be 27 member states, and those member states will all implement some sort of EID services because it's a part of the overall strategy for European Union. And obviously there are countries like Denmark and Norway and Finland and some of the Baltic states, etc., that are advanced in this process. So I think
But what in your view? Now, you've said something about using your passport, and if I had a business and I would like to do business with an EU country, which is, well, I trust the EU, but they did not have, they were not done in the implementation of the EID. Two questions linked to that. What do I do? Do I ask them to take a picture of their passport to validate, or? And second, what, in your view, is a timeline which is there? Is what are we talking? 2 years, 4 years?
It's a good question. The first thing, what do I do if people doesn't have a EID in the country which they reside inside? I can't say exactly how you would do that. The passport is kind of the fallback option. If you are in a country that has an EID, obviously it's a matter of level of integration and consuming that EID in a process that fits my requirement. For the passport part, I think it's straightforward. You don't have to take a picture of your passport. You just have to read the content of the chip. This is no secret. Anyone that has a passport in their hands, they can read the information.
And but should I, in your view, to ensure true and the right level of cybersecurity, should I ask a potential supplier or a potential company I would like to work with in a country without an EID, should I ask that person to validate?
Many in the financial sector is a mandatory requirement for all this whitewashing regulation and fraud regulation. It's a mandatory requirement that you know your customer KYC, and the thing here is that what we see today is that this is moving on. So it's moving from the financial sector and now moving also into a lot of other sectors. And with the NIS version 2, the NIS2 standard coming in 2 years, this will move into a lot of what they call important and critical sectors, transportation, food production, and telco, and many other sectors.
So you would need to do it to be compliant regardless.
Exactly. The compliant part is one part, and the security part is another part. So those two things comes along.
Yeah.
So I think there's a lot of things we can consider in that area.
Lars, I hope you got answer for your question, and thank you so very much. Well, it seems like we are kind of out of time. Time flies in good company. Of course, I will thank you all for participating and watching us today. If you have any further questions, you can still submit them if you have any for Bjarke, especially. Don't hesitate to reach out, and we will try to find an answer for you somehow. So once again, thank you very much, and thank you to my great and very insightful panel today for taking the time and answering the questions. So good day to all.